good morning. I'm Larry Spencer. I'm a member of the sort of retired faculty and staff PSU 150th Anniversary Committee, and I'm here today to interview Dick Fralick. So Dick, first question I have is when did you arrive in Plymouth? And sort of recall what it was like when you first came to Plymouth in terms of what you were doing and what Plymouth was like.
Okay, good. My name is Dick Fralick, and I arrived on campus in September of 1973. I had just recently completed my PhD in marine botany at University of New Hampshire. And I was out searching for a job when one of the deans called me and said that he had just heard of an opening that would be just right for me up at Plymouth State. And I knew Plymouth State existed, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was or where it was. So Kate and I hopped in the car that afternoon and took a ride up and got lost in Holderness. But eventually we found our way here, and I found Boyd Hall, and I found the biology department. And I met Dr. Spencer and Dr. Sylvester and a few other people, and had an interview. I didn't meet Dr. Sylvester right away. I met another person, let me think, Professor, he was prior to Dr. Sylvester. He was a meteorologist.
Oh, trying to think of that.
Anyway, his name will pop up in my head before we finish. He was here, and he asked me a lot of questions and all of that, and I went home pretty excited. He didn't indicate that I would get the job, but I learned later, or I figured out later, that it was late in the season and they needed somebody that could teach the courses, and they were desperate to fill an open faculty position. And I happened to be available, and I was desperate too because the season was getting over. And I had an opportunity to stay at UNH on a postdoc, but that was soft money, and it didn't have as many opportunities as I thought might be available up here. Further, Plymouth State College, Keene, and Granite State College, and all of these are all part of the University of New Hampshire system. So I was able to keep some of my benefits, some of my health benefits and things like that by moving up here, and also got a little bit of longevity in some other stuff. So it was a good deal if I did wind up with that job. Well, by the time I got home, this professor that was temporarily chairman of the department had called Kate and introduced himself as George Solomons, and said that what did she think of the possibility of us coming up there and spending some time as a faculty member. And of course, this got Kate all cranked up. She was really excited before I walked in the door, and I hadn't committed anything to her, nor were we using cell phones in those days. So she was just sitting at home, knitting or something, waiting for me to get home and what was the news and what was going on. And she had a bundle of excitement for me when I walked in the door after being interviewed by phone. So that's how I got here. He offered the job to Kate.
Okay. That's interesting. So what was your impression of the town when you first came up to Plymouth?
And
it doesn't have to be positive, I mean.
Well, first of all, I grew up in the city. I grew up just outside of Boston, so I was very comfortable in the city. I thought UNH, where we spent 5 years, was at the end of the map. I had never been in such a rural place in my life. And they didn't even have a camera shop in Durham. But I came up here after spending 5 years in Durham. I came up here, and it wasn't too bad, believe it or not. They had a tremendous hardware store downtown, Rand's, and I noticed he's still here. And they had a nice diner right downtown. These are things that Durham doesn't have. And a lot of other things, bits and pieces of, they had a sort of department store down there and a shoe store. That was unheard of in Durham. And So there were many more things, often in smaller packages, but than we had here. And then they were building a marketplace out at Hatch Plaza, and there was some growth out there. So it looked like a healthy community to me, and there was no issue whatsoever with parking, which in fact, if you've ever been in Durham in recent years, parking is absolutely ridiculous. Anyway.
So what was your impression of the students the first year that you taught here?
Well, the students here, I thought, were fairly good. I had been a graduate assistant with one of the introductory courses with general botany at UNH, so I saw a lot of first-year students down there. And I had been in classes, or I've been a teaching assistant in courses where there were young undergraduates. And I was very comfortable. I didn't see any tremendous differences, other than some of the classes here were a little bit larger than I had been involved with. But a lot of them a lot of students I had seen had chosen Plymouth for different reasons. I didn't realize, I really didn't realize till the first winter here how close we were to Waterville Valley, and there was plenty of skiing and stuff like that. And Tenny Mountain was thriving in those days. That was very active under Sam Hall. And but we gradually, it took us a year to explore the town and see what was here and figure out where the heck we were, and look at the lakes and the ponds. And we learned that there was a lot going on here, not only in the summer, tourists came here and stuff like that, but a lot going on, and it was a nice, healthy place. We really liked it a lot when we came here, and we liked the students. So
Now how long were you employed at Plymouth? When did you finish it? When did you finish up? And
yeah,
what kind of changes did you see in that time period from when you were first hired to when you retired?
Well, when we retired, we sort of tapered off, but I was here working for 34 years. And did I see changes in the students? Yeah, I think I did. I think I saw a good improvement in the quality of the students. I gradually got to be teaching. My first year or so here, I was only teaching kind of introductory courses. But as time passed, and I had a bit of seniority in the department, I was able to teach more upper level courses. So I began to spend more time with the majors. And in fact, we were sitting around last night waiting to see what was happening with the debates on TV for the presidential election. And I started to scratch down the names of some of the students that have kept in touch with me one way or another. And it's vast. There's just, and I bump into them all the time, and it's really funny in the strangest of places.
Right.
I met a student in the major airport in London. I bumped into a student in the airport in Puerto Rico. Our kids are out at Lake Tahoe, and we were out there at Christmas time once, and we ordered a couple of pizzas rather than have the kids cook. The person that came to the door with the pizzas was a former student of mine. And she opened the door and, kind of screamed, "Dr. Fralick, what are you doing here?" And that was overwhelming. And even others. So it's really exciting when I see these, and I see the success that these kids have achieved over time. And so I loved it. I had a wonderful time here.
Now, you mentioned in terms of dealing with students, what about the changes that you saw in the way let's say the sciences were structured and the way the faculty, functioned in that 34-year time period that you were here?
Yeah. I think when I came in, I think things were not stabilized when I walked in. People were teaching these one or two credit courses called modules. I remember that. And there was a certain amount of interest in my part. I wasn't teaching upper level courses, but I could manage to squeeze in a module on Intro to Marine Life, a 1.5 or 2 credit course in that. The reason for this is that student enrollment in the sciences had been in a declining period for some time. And what they were talking about as a department is what could we do to attract students into the department, so they took some sort of introductory courses. Within a couple of years, we created a gen ed program where we inserted some biology, chemistry, botany, marine biology, stuff like this, and we had some requirements, and we got ourselves organized over time. So as things progressed, we were able to get a chemistry major organized and isolated, so they had chemists here. We had a physics program. We developed a meteorology program, things like that. And all of us were really tuned into the fact that the programs could only be successful if we could bring in and hang on to not intelligent, but tremendous students that could get out of here and excel. They're the ones that do the advertising in any of the sciences, successful students. So that's what happened, and we got underway while I was here in environmental biology and getting an edge on people that might like to go into the biological sciences but not necessarily destined towards graduate school. And that brought in students, and so we reached a point where we had a pretty healthy department, I would think. And we, at that time, were still working together. We were working with the chemistry department and working with the meteorology department. Sorry, not meteorology, but physics. And we had Bill Taft teaching geology. You know, that was a riot. But a lot of this. But we grew and developed. Eventually, we were able to get a little bit of funding, and things fell into place that we could have a meteorology department. And that was pretty exciting because Jim Kermer and others were able to attract students and deliver a respectable program. And students from that program have moved on all over the country and all over the world doing meteorology. And now that Jim Kermer's retired, he's down in, I think he's down in Canaveral or someplace like that.
Yeah.
He's still got his foot in the meteorology component, which because of the recent Apollo 50-year anniversary, he's involved with that. But once again, our students are all over the place, and it's just it's exciting for me to be aware of that. I bump into them, you can't believe.
Right.
And my wife Katie does too.
Right. Now, was there anybody on campus that sort of mentored you when you first came, and took you under their wing, his or her wing, to sort of make sure that things were going okay? And
yeah, you were very helpful, actually, Larry. You answered a lot of questions, and you knew more about the department. And the department had gone through a shift. We had some people that were more oriented toward the field of science teaching and the educational side, and that was gradually shifting so that they were being replaced when they retired by people that had masters and PhDs in the specific disciplines. And I thought that was a big change, because we didn't have people that were trying to teach teachers, although we did this and we accommodated that. That wasn't our main goal. Our main goal, excuse me, was to produce students that could be out there doing actually hands-on science. And in fact, that's exactly what they ended up doing. Many of them are involved in those fields.
now, you mentioned this a little bit because you said you front end the students and things like that, but what were your feelings in terms of mentoring students? I mean, I know that some faculty see the students just in class, and that's about all they see them. And then there are other faculty members that, either go on field trips or have them for dinner, or that kind of thing. What was your feeling about your relationship with the students, and how has that changed? How did that change during the time that you were here at Plymouth?
Yeah, Well, one of the nice things that I got when I was a grad student at UNH was that they really insisted that you do field-oriented research, that you spend lots and lots and lots of time in the field, and then you brought your field data back and processed that and analyzed that and put it through systems. And then there was a system of presentations. Every semester you were presenting something in a small class and stuff like that. So I did a lot of that, and I loved it. I liked going on field trips, and we were able to go on extended field trips. You know, we could go down to the Cape. We could go, to Mount Washington to look at alpine plants, and down there we could go out on a research vessel out to the Azores lab and things like that. So I had many, many, many opportunities. My previous work as a student worker at Harvard took me all over the place, and so my background was doing work in the field, bringing that back, working it up in the laboratory, and seeing what kinds of results we could produce there. Well, one of the things I did at UNH was work on a GIlsonspirometer. That was new to the business of marine algae, which I worked on. And I developed, it took me a year to learn how to run the machine with any degree of confidence. And then I created the 8th day of the week, because I counted all my hours, and then I squeezed an extra 8 or 10 hours in so I could do the physiology. I fell into a laboratory down there at the new Jackson Estuarine Laboratory. They didn't have any faculty members with research money, so they opened up some of the labs to people that needed them. And of course, I was there, and so they gave me a brand new lab for 2 years. But anyway, I could get my students out, get them down to the lab, and I brought that pathway with me up here to Plymouth, and took them out into the field. And I knew people at Hubbard Brook anyway, because UNH was running programs up there. And I knew people that had been doing work up at the Mount Washington Observatory. And I knew people at Sea Grant. So when I finally got to teaching a marine biology course here, I was always able to get one of the Sea Grant vessels to take my students out. I only had maybe 15 or 20 in the class. That couldn't happen at UNH at the time because marine biology had 200 students in it. They can't pump 200 students on a boat that holds 30. So, but we could do that up here, and up here vans were easy to come by. You could call down and sign up for a van, usually within a day or two's notice, and almost be able to transport your kids out to wherever you were going in the field. So all of my kids over time got a chance to be working on lakes, to be working on the ocean. Then I had some research money, so I brought students to the Azores and different places that I thought would benefit them as much as I benefited to that. And some of the other things, I left to other people that had more expertise. But that's how I think I could offer some degree of success. We did have some interesting botanical collections, and we had a greenhouse, and these were things that I was sort of, I had more than a passing interest, because I worked in the greenhouse for a physiologist at UNH for a while. And, but I worked with Dr. Susan Murray with that, and that was tough for me. So I stuck to the marine side and kept the algae in a cabinet in another lab and stuff like, not to get in her way, because I always left my junk behind and stuff like that. But
so
anyway.
having been here for 34 years, what kind of, how many different provosts and presidents and deans, and,
oh, God,
and how did you see the structure, how did you see the structure of the college changing over there?
Interestingly, I saw a broad spectrum of administrative people, starting with Harold Hyde. And I found him to be the ultimate character. This is a guy right out of the 40s, I think. What stunned me when I met him is he was wearing reasonable clothes, except that he was wearing a white belt. And I also learned that he was pretty down to earth. This is a guy that, as a president of a college, he invited Louis Armstrong to come here and do a performance. And he had a picture on the wall of his office of Louis Armstrong with that unusual shaped trumpet, and him, his buddy Louis, because he really liked jazz and things like that. So that was pretty exciting on his spectrum. Then others that were remarkable, Caspar Mocking, he was a pretty good guy, pretty upbeat, stuff like that. Then we had Bill Farrel, and Bill Farrel was all right, but he was always a little serious. He struck me as a very serious guy. He ended up both Mocking and Farrel became chancellors down at UNH, and then let me see who followed Farrel.
Well, I don't know, I've been through so many.
Yeah. But anyway, then we had Donald Burke's.
Sarah Jane came before Donald.
Oh, Sarah Jane, yeah, okay. That's right.
And then, of course, our present president is Donald Burks, who
Yeah.
came,
I
I think he's
remember
into his third year.
Theo.
Theo was so we had a couple of intermediate.
Yeah,
Matey Barrett was interim for a while.
right, and Theo was,
interim for a while,
I liked
yeah.
Theo a lot.
Yeah. So what kind of changes did you see in the town? I mean, when you came, it was a very small town, and Hatch Plaza wasn't fully developed at that time, and when you left, Hatch Plaza was, fully.
I saw a lot of changes in the town, and but the things that appealed to me most is that if you brought your dry cleaning into the dry cleaners or something, they knew you on a first name basis. And if you went to some place, to one of the common man places or something like that, they knew you by name. And that didn't happen down in Durham. It just, maybe it happened to some extent, but we never had any money to go out to eat for one thing.
Right.
But that isn't, we found that friendly and receptive, and we ran into Dr. Kirk, who delivered, she delivered our Hans up here, and Alistair Craig.
That's the Craig, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and eventually John Bentwood, and these were neighbors and friends that, it was not like going into Boston to a big hospital, which is, it was really down to earth. And as the years passed, things got better and better and better around here, and so.
That's lots of commonality because, I think two of our girls were delivered by Ulster.
Okay.
And of course, Dr. Kirk was our pediatrician for all of our kids, so.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing wonderful about a small town, is you have that commonality.
Yeah.
What do you think some of your contributions might have been both to the department and to the college as a whole?
I don't have any major contributions per se, but I think I lent with others, and an atmosphere where a kid, maybe a student that may have wanted to go to Dartmouth and couldn't get in, might wind up here, or a kid that might not get into UNH might wind up here. And we could deliver, because of us, a relatively small size, we could deliver a pretty good and pretty personalized degree program. And I think that's the part that I may have fitted in with others that were all trying to do the same thing. I recall Dr. Bilheimer, she drove me nuts. But she was always willing to have her office open and talk to students. She wasn't, not to pick on adjuncts, but she wasn't a person that came in and did her work and went home, as we were talking about earlier. She hung around a lot, and you certainly did that. Larry Cushman did that. So we were a healthy place as far as our students were concerned. Down at UNH, this was also true. It was understood that faculty members would come in the morning and they'd teach their courses and do labs in the afternoon, but they would hang around. I mean, they didn't have to be in their offices, but they were, because they were reading or doing work, but they were available. And I saw that up here, the availability of faculty members. So I think that I was able to contribute to that kind of atmosphere.
Sort of personalized attention to
Yeah,
students.
I think that's an important
Looking
part.
at their individual, as individuals rather than as a.
Yeah.
And anything with respect to the whole college that you think you might have been able to influence or?
Well, just one little thing is the business of, with the new president, you've had some changes around here, and this probably comes as many to a surprise, where you're doing some intermixing of disciplines and things of that nature. But I worked, before I even came up to New Hampshire, I worked in a lab at Harvard, and I found that down there, in many cases, they don't have precise programs for kids. They will alter any program and mix and match and do things like that. Kate's sister-in-law went to Brown, and the same thing, that they just sat down and picked out courses they would like and tried to fit them together so that they could come out.
Personalize their education.
Yeah, personalized again, yeah. But they personalized their curriculum. And I'm seeing movement in that direction, but that's happening throughout the country. That's not new. I mean, it's new to Plymouth, but they're already doing this at UNH. Now, there is a downside to this, and that downside is that it's a good place for a split person. No, I won't say that. The downside is that sometimes it takes you longer to get to a certain point. If you have a person an advisor that will get you into courses and take you right up to your graduation without any diversions and things like that, sometimes that fits some people. I always like to have a list of courses that I knew what was coming next, that kind of thing. But they mix these, and apparently this responds to kids.
Right. Now, of course, Plymouth is a small place, and some would say it's somewhat provincial. How did you, as a scientist, keep up with what was going on in science? I mean, what kind of meetings did you go to, or what kind of things did you participate in, sort of to keep your hand in the larger world of science while you were here at Plymouth?
Well, I was really lucky because I was able to find some small grants that allowed me to do some research in other parts of the world. And I was contacted one time by USAID to do some work in Portugal in the Azores. So I was able to get a program. I was first of all invited over there for 3 months in the summer to advise them on some issues with alga producing algae and why the crops were diminishing and so forth. So in overnight, there were 9 islands, and it's really hard to do any kind of survey work or get a good picture out of 9 islands in 3 months alone. And so I created a report. I pretty much put in what I thought. I brought it to USAID at the end, and I said, this is where I think things are at. You need to spend more money, and you need to extend this for a number of years. So I wound up getting a little over $1 million in piecemeal, and was able to bring some students down there to work with me at different times. Unfortunately, we had a bad earthquake one of those times, and my students went home. But anyway, things like that. And I was able to do some consulting work. One of my friends got a grant to do some work in the Philippines. So I was able to do that. I suddenly realized I could do stuff in other parts of the world instead of focusing on what was going on in Nahant or Gloucester or Rockport or some of these places. When I worked in the lab down at Harvard, they utilized scuba diving for the first organized survey of marine algae out in Rockport, Halibut Point out there. And this was eventually published in journal Rodora. But it's the first one on the entire East Coast to have an organized program that took place over 3 years, diving every 2 weeks, collecting and evaluating the algae that was there. And a tremendous learning experience for me, but it provided me with an opportunity to do similar places elsewhere. And I did a big project from Eastport down to Bridgeport, taking a look at all the classical areas where people have collected historically using herbarium specimens, and seeing what I could find doing that alone. This is what I've done in recent years. So I've kept my hand in it one way or another. Yeah, I worked a few summers at the Environmental Systems Lab at Woods Hole, because we had a house down there. I did that kind of thing. So I stayed active, go to the regional meetings and all of that. And so that was pretty exciting. And I'm still in contact with some of my colleagues today. And I just recently came back from Ireland, and I try to make contact with one of my colleagues there at the University of Cork.
Okay.
He came to our house for a visit one summer for a week.
Wow.
And the kids picked him up in the car, and they called him the dork from Cork. But a lot of fun, and an excellent algae guy, and a pleasure to talk to. So
We're also trying to collect, I guess you could say, some little-known stories. And how about telling us about when you trained all of the biologists in doing scuba in the local pool? Do you remember that?
I do. When we first got here, there was interest in the department. Dr. Taff, yourself, Dr. Murray, might have been one or two others, but everybody got interested in algae. And I think I gave a seminar that was talking about connecting algae with diving and stuff like that. But people got interested. And so we checked, and we could use the pool. And so we brought some diving equipment over, and we essentially trained a half a dozen people, I think, and built half one out and bought equipment. You were involved in the future. Dr. Murray didn't, she didn't like it.
She did it though, right?
She did it, yeah. She was.
We did our final dive was in the pool, and we had to take the mouthpiece out and
Right,
the
remove
mask
your
off.
mask.
Would you certify any of those people today?
Well, the rules of that haven't changed. The equipment's changed a little bit and gotten a little more complicated. But you could still dive with that equipment today, that exact same equipment,
Right.
and be perfectly safe.
So we're just about at the end of the interview. Is there anything that we haven't covered or talked about that you think you'd like to mention? Is there anything from your experience here that you would say, maybe we should go this way in the future because it was so much of a positive thing in the past? Well,
I would like to just say one little quick thing off my list of things here. I told you last night I sat down with Kate, and I was just scribbling out the names of some of my former students, and it's kind of fun to rehash this, and that's why I'm sorry. I look forward to October when we have our faculty gathering, because we can touch base about some of these. But just going down the quick list, some of these I know you remember. Kim Sanborn, she's presently in a PhD program at UNH. Christos Kyros, one of the Greek students that we had.
Right.
I was on his doctoral committee at Syracuse University. Just very, very quickly, Gilda Estacion. She was an exchange student that came here from the Philippines. She's now second in command for a big research laboratory at Silliman University in the island of Negros. Let me see. Two others. David Anderson is educational director for the Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forest. And two that I bumped into. One of them, I was at a program at the Wentworth greenhouse. This is a very big greenhouse in Dover. And the person that looked like the foreman came over and talked to me and said that he remembered me from a long time ago. And how was that? Well, he remembered me from Plymouth State College. And this guy's name, I didn't have him as a student, but he remembered that I was a person, was David Wentworth. As things happened, people in his family died. He had then gotten a business degree, and he took over, and that greenhouse, that whole, you know,
Right, that
big
company.
thing is his.
Wow.
He's the
wow,
boss of that,
Wow.
and he has nothing but good things to say
Say
about
about
that.
his time at Plymouth then.
One last one is, it's a person you may remember, his name was Keith Halloran.
Right, I remember Keith.
Keith was a student, you know, he wasn't the guy that was out there waving a flag saying, look
Right.
at me, quiet, serious, and all of that. He gave a presentation at the retired people's organization that we belong to down there. It turns out that he's one of the top guys at a company called Lanza. It's a Swiss company that prepares medications, and in particular, it specializes with developing the coatings that go around certain capsules that,
Oh, okay.
that
right.
people take. They have a facility. They have facilities all over the world, but they have one at Pease Space. They have 1,600 people working for
Wow.
them at their facility there,
Wow.
and this is the number 2 person.
And,
You know, there's a guy, the director, and he's the next guy down. He's the supervisor of every bit of biology that takes place in that plant. That's an international plant.
Right, right.
And I was stunned. He walked in and said, "Hi, Dr. Fralick. You may not remember me." I didn't recognize his face, but you know, my mind plays tricks on me,
Right,
and I
right,
remembered him from the roster.
Right, right.
And,
right.
So that was exciting. So now at my age, I'm not here anymore indeed, but I'm really happy that I was here, and I had good colleagues. I saw the place evolve and develop. And just looking at this place, I'm in a beautiful recording studio, in a beautiful library. The science building has been, you know, expanded, and wow. I was lucky to be here, but the kids, students coming after this are really lucky to be there as well.
Well, you were here in sort of a major transition from simply a teacher's college into actually.
Right, everything wasn't locked into place,
Right, right.
so there was lots of, I could do far more from here than I could at UNH.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being willing to come up from Durham to be interviewed. And
Well, thank you for inviting me.